In the years leading up to America's entry into World War II, a quiet revolution unfolded in offices, darkened rooms, and libraries across Washington. While Europe plunged into chaos and bombs fell across cities from London to Warsaw, a select cadre of intelligence officers, cryptographers, and analysts labored in obscurity, trying to discern the intentions of foreign powers before the nation itself was drawn into the maelstrom. Their tools were not guns or tanks, but codebooks, intercepts, and painstaking analysis. In an era when radio transmissions could traverse continents in seconds, yet encryption could obscure their meaning, these men and women faced a monumental challenge: to make sense of a world moving toward total war, and to predict the movements of adversaries whose cunning was matched only by their ruthlessness. The earliest American efforts were humble and fragmented. Signals intelligence units operated in secrecy under the Navy and Army, often unaware of each other's existence, decoding fragmented radio chatter from Germany, Italy, and Japan. Analysts pored over intercepted messages in languages few spoke fluently, attempting to untangle patterns that might reveal military buildup or political strategy. Without advanced computers or automated systems, every break relied on human ingenuity. Cryptographers like William Friedman pioneered new techniques, translating encrypted transmissions into actionable intelligence, demonstrating that mathematics, logic, and patient observation could rival brute force on the battlefield. While the war in Europe had begun, many in the American government were skeptical of the scale of the threat. Reports of German technological advances, from radar systems to mechanized divisions, were met with disbelief or bureaucratic inertia. Intelligence officers found themselves not only decoding enemy communications, but also persuading their own leaders to take the threat seriously. Every memorandum, every intercept, and every cryptanalysis became part of a high-stakes game, where failing to convince decision-makers could cost lives in the battles yet to come. The tension of this invisible struggle weighed heavily, for success was intangible, but failure would soon be measured in blood. By the late 1930s, attention shifted to Japan, whose expansion across China and into the Pacific presented a new challenge. American intelligence struggled with geographic distance, language barriers, and limited networks of informants. Officers stationed in embassies, consulates, and trading posts risked their lives and careers to collect information, often relying on local contacts who could disappear at a moment's notice. Reports from these sources, pieced together with intercepted radio messages and painstaking analysis of shipping and troop movements, began to reveal the meticulous planning behind Japanese operations. It became increasingly clear that a nation could prepare for war with a precision and patience matched only by the analysts trying to anticipate it. The creation of central intelligence hubs in the United States transformed these disparate efforts into coordinated action. Facilities in Washington and New York brought together cryptographers, analysts, linguists, and military officers under a unified mission to make sense of enemy intentions and capabilities before they could strike. Each intercept was cataloged, each decoded message cross-referenced with reconnaissance reports. Analysts developed intricate maps and visualizations, plotting troop movements, industrial output, and naval logistics. The work was methodical, exhausting, and often invisible, yet it formed the bedrock of the decisions that would later guide commanders in Europe, Africa, and the Pacific. In Europe, the Axis powers were confident in their secrecy, believing their codes, ciphers, and radio discipline were impenetrable. German Enigma machines, complex and seemingly unbreakable, became the symbol of this technological arrogance. Yet American and British cryptographers worked tirelessly, coordinating across the Atlantic to crack the secrets hidden in seemingly random strings of letters. Each breakthrough, though technical, had dramatic operational consequences: convoys rerouted, bombing raids adjusted, and the timing of Allied offensives subtly informed by secrets extracted from the heart of the enemy's communications. Intelligence had become an invisible sword, shaping war before bombs could fall. American officers also understood the value of deception. They studied patterns of enemy observation, learning how to feed false information or hide real plans in plain sight. The creation of phantom divisions, misleading radio traffic, and staged equipment deployments would later become hallmarks of operations such as the invasion of Normandy. But even in these early days, analysts recognized that intelligence was not only about reading the enemy. It was about controlling perception, shaping choices, and turning the adversary's own confidence into a vulnerability. In this way, the war was fought as much in shadows as on the front lines. As 1941 approached, the stage was set for a decisive interplay between American intelligence and Axis ambition. While Europe burned and the Pacific simmered, the United States quietly built the foundations of a network that would soon influence every major theater of war. It was a war waged in offices and laboratories, in secret rooms with maps and cryptic cables, but its effects would echo across continents, determining the fate of armies, cities, and nations. The untold story of how these silent warriors outsmarted the Axis had begun, its threads stretching from Washington to the heart of enemy territory, weaving a narrative of patience, ingenuity, and relentless observation that would shape history itself. By the spring of 1941, the German war machine was moving with terrifying precision. Panzer divisions rolled across Europe, and Luftwaffe bombers darkened the skies with lethal intent. Yet behind the battlefield chaos, American and British cryptographers were engaged in a struggle of equal intensity, a battle that unfolded not on the front lines, but in rooms filled with the hum of early electromechanical machines and the scratch of pencils on decoding sheets. The German Enigma machine, seemingly invincible with its rotating rotors and daily changing keys, was both a technological marvel and a potential Achilles heel. Allied analysts understood that every message intercepted, every pattern discerned, could translate into operational advantage on the battlefield, a chance to outmaneuver the enemy before he even knew what hit him. Initial efforts to penetrate Enigma were daunting. Every German operator could choose settings in multiple combinations, producing a cipher that appeared entirely random. Intelligence officers combed through thousands of messages, searching for repeated phrases, common weather reports, or procedural mistakes that might betray the code structure. Early breakthroughs were painstakingly slow, often requiring weeks to validate patterns that, if misinterpreted, could lead to catastrophic miscalculations. Yet the persistence of these analysts reflected a profound understanding. In war, knowledge was power, and without it, even the mightiest armies were blind. American intelligence benefited greatly from collaboration with British codebreakers stationed at Bletchley Park. Though operating under extreme secrecy, the exchange of methods, crib techniques, and analytic insights allowed U.S. teams to accelerate progress on German ciphers. American mathematicians and engineers, many recruited from academia and industry, applied logic, probability, and mechanical ingenuity to the problem, developing machines capable of automating parts of the decryption process. These early computational devices, precursors to modern computers, transformed cryptography from a slow, manual art into a rapid, systematic science, enabling analysts to keep pace with the relentless flow of German communications. But Enigma was only part of the intelligence puzzle. Reports indicated that German industrial production, troop movements, and logistical deployments were coordinated with extraordinary efficiency, masking vulnerabilities behind disciplined secrecy. Analysts combed through aerial reconnaissance, intercepted radio traffic, and captured documents to identify patterns in rail shipments, fuel storage, and ammunition supply. Each fragment of information became a tile in a mosaic that revealed the enemy's operational rhythms. Slowly, painstakingly, American intelligence began to discern the hidden structure of Germany's war economy, exposing weak points that could be exploited through targeted bombing campaigns or tactical maneuvers on the front lines. Equally critical were the human sources embedded behind enemy lines. Agents, informants, and spies risked everything to gather intelligence on troop locations, industrial sites, and naval operations. Reports often arrived coded in personal letters, subtle gestures, or encrypted messages hidden in plain sight. Analysts had to separate truth from deception, extracting actionable insight from fragments of rumor or observation. These efforts demonstrated a fundamental principle of intelligence, that every human observation, no matter how small, could tip the balance in the theater of war, provided it was correctly interpreted and integrated with other streams of data. American intelligence also recognized the value of industrial espionage. Teams monitored the German acquisition of raw materials, the expansion of synthetic fuel plants, and the production rates of tanks and aircraft. By tracking these metrics, analysts could predict not only what Germany could build, but when and where those assets might be deployed. These predictions informed strategic planning at the highest levels, guiding decisions about bombing targets, troop deployments, and naval operations. The result was a war fought with unprecedented foresight. Commanders could anticipate enemy capabilities and prepare contingencies before confrontation occurred. Deception became another crucial instrument. Analysts studied how the Axis interpreted Allied movements, shaping misinformation campaigns that would mislead enemy planners. Dummy divisions, staged equipment, and fabricated radio traffic were designed to confuse German intelligence, making them allocate resources to non-existent threats. These operations required close coordination between analysts, operational planners, and field units, proving that intelligence was not only about gathering knowledge, but also about shaping perception, turning the enemy's assumptions against him with careful precision. By mid-1941, the combined efforts of American cryptographers, analysts, spies, and engineers had begun to yield measurable results. Intercepted communications informed naval convoys, enabling them to avoid U-boat wolf packs. Analysis of industrial patterns guided bombing raids that disrupted production before weapons could reach the front. Every success reinforced the principle that information, accurately collected and swiftly analyzed, could be as decisive as tanks or aircraft. The untold story of American intelligence was emerging as a quiet but unstoppable force, one that would soon prove crucial in tipping the scales of a global conflict. As 1941 deepened, the war expanded across multiple fronts, and the value of intelligence grew exponentially. American officers understood that victory would not simply come from overwhelming firepower. It would come from anticipating enemy moves, understanding industrial capacity, and intercepting plans before they could be executed. Signals intelligence became a lifeline. Every radio transmission, no matter how mundane it seemed, was scrutinized for hidden meaning. Enemy commanders often transmitted with strict discipline, yet human error persisted. Predictable phrasing, repeated procedural mistakes, and habitual reporting provided cracks in an otherwise opaque system. Analysts pounced on these small openings, extracting operational insights that could determine the success or failure of entire campaigns. Cryptography teams worked tirelessly to break German, Italian, and Japanese codes, each with its own complex encryption schemes. The German Enigma and Japanese Purple ciphers were the most notorious, yet the Americans approached them with equal rigor. Mathematicians, linguists, and engineers collaborated to design decryption methods, combining logic, pattern recognition, and mechanical innovation. Electromechanical machines churned through permutations that humans could not hope to calculate in a lifetime, accelerating the process and enabling intelligence officers to respond in near real time. With each breakthrough, a veil lifted, revealing movements, plans, and vulnerabilities that would have remained invisible without the painstaking labor of these unseen heroes. Beyond the machines and codes, human intelligence played a critical role. Agents embedded in Axis-controlled territories risked capture and execution to deliver fragments of information. The construction of new factories, troop movements, the arrival of critical raw materials. These reports, often frail and fragmentary, were analyzed and cross-referenced with intercepted communications and aerial reconnaissance. What might appear as isolated data became actionable intelligence when interpreted within the broader operational picture. Analysts learned to connect seemingly unrelated dots, uncovering supply routes, logistical bottlenecks, and emerging strategies that the Axis believed were perfectly concealed. Reconnaissance flights complemented these efforts, providing photographic evidence to confirm or challenge existing reports. High-altitude aircraft equipped with advanced cameras mapped industrial zones, ports, and transportation networks with astonishing detail. Analysts scrutinized shadows, smoke plumes, and construction activity to identify the function of buildings and the tempo of production. Every image told a story. A rebuilt rail line suggested troop redeployment. A new refinery chimney hinted at increased fuel output, and a quiet port could conceal an imminent naval operation. The integration of human observation, signals intelligence, and aerial reconnaissance created a three-dimensional picture of enemy capability and intent. American intelligence also refined methods of counterintelligence to protect their own operations. Double agents, misinformation campaigns, and controlled leaks were carefully orchestrated to mislead the Axis about Allied plans and strengths. Analysts studied enemy reactions to determine whether deception efforts were effective, measuring not only tangible effects on the battlefield, but also psychological responses in command centers. These operations required a subtle interplay of timing, precision, and creativity, turning knowledge into a weapon capable of shaping decisions without a single shot being fired. Industrial intelligence became a cornerstone of operational planning. Analysts monitored production outputs, shipping manifests, and raw material consumption, identifying weaknesses in the enemy's supply chain. They calculated the time required to replace lost equipment and assessed the vulnerability of critical facilities to air or sabotage attacks. These insights guided strategic bombing campaigns, allowing the Allies to target the right factories, oil depots, and transportation hubs at the right time. By doing so, they systematically eroded the Axis's capacity to sustain the war, demonstrating that intelligence could strike as decisively as any battle-hardened army. The work was not without human cost. Cryptographers, analysts, and agents often labored in isolation under intense secrecy, with the weight of thousands of lives resting on the accuracy of their work. Errors could lead to disaster. Misinterpreted codes, overlooked signals, or misjudged patterns had the potential to expose convoys to attack or misalign entire campaigns. Yet these professionals persisted, motivated by a profound understanding that the battles fought in offices, darkrooms, and safe houses were inseparable from those raging across continents and oceans. Their labor, largely invisible to the public, became a decisive element in the war's unfolding drama. By the end of 1941, the groundwork for America's intelligence triumph was firmly established. The nation had created a sophisticated network capable of interpreting enemy intentions, forecasting operations, and shaping strategic decisions before combat even began. What emerged was an integrated system where signals intelligence, human intelligence, industrial analysis, and reconnaissance functioned as a single, lethal instrument. This orchestration proved that warfare was no longer solely a matter of guns and tanks. It had entered an era where knowledge, insight, and anticipation could determine victory or defeat, shaping the fate of nations before a single bullet was fired. While Europe burned under the German advance, a separate and equally complex intelligence struggle unfolded across the Pacific. Japanese military operations were shrouded in secrecy, with meticulously disciplined radio procedures and an almost religious dedication to operational security. American intelligence faced the daunting task of penetrating these layers of concealment from thousands of miles away. Analysts in Washington and field offices relied on a combination of intercepted radio communications, reports from embassies and consulates, and the occasional informant brave enough to risk observation in hostile territory. Each fragment of information, no matter how small, could illuminate the shadowed pathways of Japanese planning. The Japanese cipher, known as Purple, represented one of the most formidable challenges. Unlike the German Enigma, which was mechanical and could be approached through pattern recognition, Purple relied on an electromechanical system with intricate substitution ciphers, producing encrypted messages that appeared as meaningless strings of letters. American cryptographers, led by individuals such as William Friedman, approached this problem with methodical rigor. Through patience, innovation, and the assembly of an entirely new decryption methodology, analysts eventually replicated the encryption logic, allowing them to read high-level communications between Tokyo and its overseas commands. This breakthrough was a monumental achievement, providing insight into the timing, strategy, and intent of Japanese operations before they could be executed. Equally critical was the work of field agents and naval intelligence. Observers stationed in neutral or occupied territories monitored troop movements, ship departures, and logistical hubs. Every harbor examined, every rail car noted, Every vessel counted became a piece of a puzzle that analysts stitched together into an operational picture. In some cases, seemingly innocuous commercial data, shipping manifests, cargo schedules, or port activity, offered clues about impending attacks or supply shortages. Intelligence officers learned to think creatively, recognizing that the war could be read not only in battle reports but in the rhythms of trade, transportation, and industrial production. Reconnaissance aircraft and photo reconnaissance missions played an equally vital role. Pilots flew over islands and enemy installations with cameras designed to capture the smallest detail from high altitude. Analysts studied shadows, dock configurations, and construction activity to estimate troop strength and industrial capability. They tracked the construction of airfields, fuel depots, and storage facilities, often anticipating Japanese defensive measures before the commanders themselves fully deployed them. This meticulous observation enabled U.S. planners to orchestrate strikes that maximized impact while minimizing risk to their own forces. Coordination between intelligence streams became the keystone of strategy. Signals intelligence, human observation, and aerial reconnaissance were integrated to form a coherent operational understanding. Analysts identified discrepancies, validated reports, and cross-referenced sources to build actionable intelligence. This holistic approach allowed commanders to anticipate enemy moves, prepare countermeasures, and plan offensives with unprecedented precision. In the Pacific, where vast distances and challenging geography complicated operations, the ability to forecast Japanese strategy became a force multiplier, turning limited American resources into decisive instruments of war. Deception operations complemented these intelligence efforts. The Allies learned to feed false signals to mislead Japanese planners, employing dummy installations, staged communications, and misinformation to divert attention from true targets. These operations required careful study of Japanese interpretation of intelligence, timing, and behavioral patterns. By controlling perception as much as reality, American intelligence created opportunities to strike with strategic advantage, undermining the enemy's confidence while preserving their own operational secrecy. The war was being fought as much in the minds of commanders as on the islands and seas of the Pacific. Industrial intelligence remained a crucial element. Analysts monitored Japan's capacity for shipbuilding, aircraft production, and fuel synthesis, understanding that material limitations could dictate strategic decisions. By tracking raw material shortages, shipping delays, and manufacturing bottlenecks, American intelligence could predict operational constraints long before Japanese commanders acknowledged them. This foresight allowed planners to sequence attacks, prioritize targets, and allocate resources with surgical precision, ensuring that each operation had maximum effect in weakening the enemy's war capability. By late 1941, American intelligence in the Pacific had laid the groundwork for decisive action. Even before Pearl Harbor, analysts were piecing together the contours of Japanese expansion, identifying vulnerabilities, and preparing strategic responses. The meticulous integration of signals, human observation, reconnaissance, and industrial analysis created a blueprint for anticipating enemy action. In the shadowed halls of intelligence offices, the United States was preparing to turn information into power, proving that the war could be shaped not only by force but by the unseen hands of those who observed, analyzed, and outsmarted the Axis before a single shot was fired. As the war escalated across Europe, American intelligence faced the immense challenge of infiltrating a continent tightly controlled by Axis powers. Agents operating behind enemy lines became the lifeblood of actionable information, risking capture, interrogation, and execution to provide insight into troop movements, fortifications, and industrial output. These operatives were often ordinary citizens with extraordinary courage, traders, diplomats, journalists, and locals willing to assist. Each report they delivered was carefully verified, cross-referenced, and woven into an intricate web of intelligence that extended from neutral ports to the occupied heartlands of Germany, France, and the Low Countries. The work of these field agents demanded ingenuity and adaptability. Messages were hidden in innocuous objects, encoded in everyday correspondence, or delivered through clandestine couriers who traveled with forged papers and assumed identities. Timing was critical. A delay of even a few hours could render a report useless if enemy movements outpaced it. Analysts in Washington and London labored to ensure that every fragment of intelligence contributed to a larger understanding of the enemy's operational patterns. Through this painstaking process, what might appear as isolated observations coalesced into a coherent map of Axis strength and intent. Signals intelligence in Europe operated in parallel, intercepting vast streams of German and Italian communications. While the Enigma cipher initially seemed impregnable, repeated operator errors, predictable phrases, and meticulous analysis eventually provided openings. Cryptographers worked around the clock, combining human intuition with early electromechanical decoding machines to decipher thousands of messages. Each successful decryption offered a glimpse into the enemy's strategic planning, revealing supply routes, troop concentrations, and industrial output. These insights allowed Allied commanders to anticipate attacks, protect convoys, and coordinate bombing campaigns with unprecedented precision. Aerial reconnaissance complemented human and signals intelligence. High-altitude photography provided a bird's-eye view of German fortifications, airfields, and logistical hubs. Analysts examined shadows, traffic patterns, and construction activity to assess troops' strength and manufacturing capacity. This visual intelligence confirmed or contradicted reports from field agents, creating a multidimensional understanding of enemy operations. Even subtle changes, new rail sidings, fresh fuel storage, or repaired bomb craters, offered crucial clues about Axis priorities and capabilities, shaping the timing and focus of Allied operations. Industrial intelligence was a cornerstone of the European strategy. Analysts meticulously tracked German production of tanks, aircraft, ammunition, and fuel, using intercepted shipments, trade data, and captured documents to estimate capacity and predict bottlenecks. This knowledge informed strategic bombing campaigns, directing raids to critical facilities that could cripple Axis production without unnecessary waste of resources. The ability to strike decisively at the heart of the enemy's industrial machine became a defining feature of the Allied approach, demonstrating that intelligence could shape the battlefield as decisively as infantry or artillery. Counterintelligence operations added another layer of complexity. Allied planners worked to mislead the Axis regarding troop deployments and strategic intentions. Dummy armies, false communications, and staged movements diverted attention and created operational opportunities. These deception operations required a deep understanding of the enemy's intelligence methods and perceptions. Every successful misdirection reduced risk to Allied forces while amplifying the psychological pressure on Axis command structures, showing that intelligence was not only about gathering facts, but about controlling the enemy's interpretation of reality. The human cost of these intelligence efforts was immense. Agents captured behind enemy lines faced brutal interrogations and near-certain death. Cryptographers worked under extreme secrecy, often isolated from their families, carrying the knowledge that a single error could lead to disaster. Yet this invisible army persisted, driven by a sense of duty and the knowledge that their work saved lives on the front lines. Their contributions, though largely unknown to the public, were critical to the operational success of American and Allied forces across Europe. By the end of 1942, the intelligence network in Europe had matured into a finely tuned instrument of war. Signals, reconnaissance, industrial analysis, and human observation functioned in a synchronized manner, providing commanders with real-time insights into enemy movements and capabilities. This network allowed the Allies not only to react to Axis operations, but to anticipate them, striking with foresight and precision. In this way, American intelligence proved that wars could be shaped in secret, in offices, darkrooms, and hidden safe houses, turning information into a weapon that rivaled any artillery barrage or armored division. By 1942, the Battle of the Atlantic had become a crucible in which American intelligence proved its transformative power. German U-boats prowled the seas with lethal efficiency, sinking convoys and threatening to sever the vital supply lines connecting the United States to Europe. American analysts, working closely with British intelligence, recognized that success in this theater would depend not only on firepower, but on foresight. on the ability to predict submarine deployments and intercept communications before attacks could occur. Every convoy carried essential supplies, and every ship lost could shift the balance of the war. Intelligence became the linchpin that could transform vulnerability into strategic advantage. Signals intelligence emerged as the first line of defense against the U-boat threat. Intercepted radio transmissions between German submarines and their command centers were painstakingly analyzed for patterns and anomalies. Cryptographers worked around the clock, identifying repeated phrases, procedural slips, and predictable routes. Even minor errors by U-boat operators offered critical insights into patrol areas, supply rendezvous points, and convoy attack strategies. By exploiting these small imperfections, intelligence officers could forecast submarine movements, allowing convoys to adjust routes or deploy escort ships with precision. Aerial reconnaissance complemented these efforts. Long-range patrol aircraft scoured the North Atlantic, scanning for shadows on the waves, wakes of submarines, or suspicious concentrations of vessels. Observers recorded every detail, from the angle of a periscope to the number of torpedo tubes visible on a surfaced U-boat. These observations, cross-referenced with signals intelligence, provided a dynamic picture of enemy operations. Analysts could determine not only where U-boats were operating, but also the effectiveness of German coordination, the concentration of patrols, and potential weaknesses in the Wolfpack strategy. Industrial intelligence played a subtler, yet equally crucial, role. Analysts monitored German submarine production, repairs, and fuel logistics. By understanding the constraints of U-boat construction, deployment cycles, and maintenance needs, intelligence officers could predict when fleets would be at maximum strength or when shortages would limit operational effectiveness. This information informed both defensive measures for convoys and offensive strategies for Allied anti-submarine forces, demonstrating that foresight could be just as lethal as direct engagement. Counterintelligence also shaped the Atlantic campaign. The Allies employed deception to mislead German commanders regarding convoy routes and timing. Dummy transmissions, false convoy signals, and carefully staged naval movements created uncertainty in the minds of U-boat officers. The result was a deliberate misallocation of enemy resources, reducing attacks on actual supply lines while amplifying the psychological strain on the Kriegsmarine. Intelligence was not merely reactive. It actively shaped the battlefield by manipulating enemy perceptions. American intelligence officers understood that coordination across multiple domains was essential. Signals, reconnaissance, industrial analysis, and counterintelligence had to operate in perfect synchrony to guide operational decisions. Convoy routes were optimized based on decrypted communications, aerial reconnaissance, and industrial estimates of U-boat availability. Naval commanders received continuous updates, allowing them to respond to emerging threats with speed and accuracy. This integration transformed the Atlantic from a vast, unpredictable battlefield into a managed, dynamic theater where knowledge dictated outcomes as much as firepower. The human element remained critical. Analysts worked under extreme pressure, often isolated for long stretches, fully aware that a single miscalculation could sink hundreds of tons of supplies and endanger thousands of lives. Pilots, scouts, and reconnaissance teams braved stormy skies and turbulent seas to gather imagery and data, knowing that failure could mean catastrophe for convoys thousands of miles away. Each successful interception, each accurate prediction, became a silent victory, saving ships and sustaining the lifeline of the Allied war effort. By the end of 1942, American intelligence had transformed the Atlantic into a domain where foresight and analysis could counter brute force. U-boat attacks, once devastatingly effective, began to diminish as Allied convoys moved with increased safety and precision. The integration of signals intelligence, aerial reconnaissance, industrial analysis, and counterintelligence created a model of modern warfare in which knowledge, rather than sheer firepower alone, became decisive. In the vast and unforgiving Atlantic, the unseen hand of American intelligence had begun to outsmart one of the most feared weapons of the Axis, proving the transformative power of foresight, precision, and relentless analytical rigor. By 1942, the Battle of the Atlantic had become a crucible in which American intelligence proved its transformative power. German U-boats prowled the seas with lethal efficiency, sinking convoys and threatening to sever the vital supply lines connecting the United States to Europe. American analysts, working closely with British intelligence, recognized that success in this theater would depend not only on firepower, but on foresight, on the ability to predict submarine deployments and intercept communications before attacks could occur. Every convoy carried essential supplies, and every ship lost could shift the balance of the war. Intelligence became the linchpin that could transform vulnerability into strategic advantage. Signals intelligence emerged as the first line of defense against the U-boat threat. Intercepted radio transmissions between German submarines and their command centers were painstakingly analyzed for patterns and anomalies. Cryptographers worked around the clock, identifying repeated phrases, procedural slips, and predictable routes. Even minor errors by U-boat operators offered critical insights into patrol areas, supply rendezvous points, and convoy attack strategies. By exploiting these small imperfections, intelligence officers could forecast submarine movements, allowing convoys to adjust routes or deploy escort ships with precision. Aerial reconnaissance complemented these efforts. Long-range patrol aircraft scoured the North Atlantic, scanning for shadows on the waves, wakes of submarines, or suspicious concentrations of vessels. Observers recorded every detail, from the angle of a periscope to the number of torpedo tubes visible on a surfaced U-boat. These observations, cross-referenced with signals intelligence, provided a dynamic picture of enemy operations. Analysts could determine not only where U-boats were operating, but also the effectiveness of German coordination, the concentration of patrols, and potential weaknesses in the Wolfpack strategy. Industrial intelligence played a subtler, yet equally crucial, role. Analysts monitored German submarine production, repairs, and fuel logistics. By understanding the constraints of U-boat construction, deployment cycles, and maintenance needs, intelligence officers could predict when fleets would be at maximum strength or when shortages would limit operational effectiveness. This information informed both defensive measures for convoys and offensive strategies for Allied anti-submarine forces, demonstrating that foresight could be just as lethal as direct engagement. Counterintelligence also shaped the Atlantic campaign. The Allies employed deception to mislead German commanders regarding convoy routes and timing. Dummy transmissions, false convoy signals, and carefully staged naval movements created uncertainty in the minds of U-boat officers. The result was a deliberate misallocation of enemy resources, reducing attacks on actual supply lines while amplifying the psychological strain on the Kriegsmarine. Intelligence was not merely reactive. It actively shaped the battlefield by manipulating enemy perceptions. American intelligence officers understood that coordination across multiple domains was essential. Signals, reconnaissance, industrial analysis, and counterintelligence had to operate in perfect synchrony to guide operational decisions. Convoy routes were optimized based on decrypted communications, aerial reconnaissance, and industrial estimates of U-boat availability. Naval commanders received continuous updates, allowing them to respond to emerging threats with speed and accuracy. This integration transformed the Atlantic from a vast, unpredictable battlefield into a managed, dynamic theater where knowledge dictated outcomes as much as firepower. The human element remained critical. Analysts worked under extreme pressure, often isolated for long stretches, fully aware that a single miscalculation could sink hundreds of tons of supplies and endanger thousands of lives. Pilots, scouts, and reconnaissance teams braved stormy skies and turbulent seas to gather imagery and data, knowing that failure could mean catastrophe for convoys thousands of miles away. Each successful interception, each accurate prediction, became a silent victory, saving ships and sustaining the lifeline of the Allied war effort. By the end of 1942, American intelligence had transformed the Atlantic into a domain where foresight and analysis could counter brute force. U-boat attacks, once devastatingly effective, began to diminish as Allied convoys moved with increased safety and precision. The integration of signals intelligence, aerial reconnaissance, industrial analysis, and counterintelligence created a model of modern warfare in which knowledge, rather than sheer firepower alone, became decisive. In the vast and unforgiving Atlantic, The unseen hand of American intelligence had begun to outsmart one of the most feared weapons of the Axis, proving the transformative power of foresight, precision, and relentless analytical rigor. By 1943, the Pacific theater had become a war of vast distances, complex logistics, and hidden threats. Japanese operational secrecy posed a profound challenge, yet American intelligence had begun to penetrate these veils through a combination of signals intelligence, field observation, and careful analysis. The breakthrough with the Purple Cipher allowed U.S. officers to read high-level Japanese communications, revealing not only operational plans but also strategic intentions that had previously been shrouded in ambiguity. This insight transformed the Pacific War from a reactive struggle into a contest of foresight, where knowledge of enemy plans became as lethal as any fleet or squadron. Signals intelligence revealed Japanese priorities, fleet movements, and the timing of supply shipments, enabling Allied forces to preemptively position ships, aircraft, and troops. Analysts tracked subtle patterns, such as the sequence of coded messages, variations in communication frequency, and operational jargon, all of which indicated imminent action. Each decrypted transmission was a window into the mind of the enemy, providing context that informed both tactical decisions and overarching strategy. The intelligence community had turned cryptography into a decisive instrument, shifting the balance of power across the Pacific before combat even began. Human intelligence in occupied territories and neutral nations complemented these efforts. Agents risked exposure and execution to observe troop movements, dockyard activity, and airfield construction. They reported seemingly mundane details: the arrival of new ships, the transport of aviation fuel, the expansion of repair facilities, that, when analyzed alongside intercepted communications, revealed operational patterns and vulnerabilities. This combination of local observation and high-level decryption allowed planners to anticipate Japanese strategies, prepare defensive measures, and launch counteroffensives with precision, saving countless lives and material assets. Aerial reconnaissance further enhanced situational awareness. Long-range patrol aircraft mapped islands, harbors, and supply depots, capturing detailed photographs that analysts studied for signs of construction, troop deployment, and logistical capacity. Even minor anomalies, a newly laid dock, fresh camouflage, or shadows indicating troop movements, could signify critical changes in enemy plans. Analysts correlated these observations with signals intelligence and human reports, building a dynamic, three-dimensional understanding of Japanese operations that guided strategic decision-making across the theater. Industrial intelligence also played a pivotal role. Analysts monitored Japanese shipbuilding, aircraft production, and fuel manufacturing, calculating potential deployment timelines and predicting operational constraints. By understanding the material limitations of the Japanese war effort, American planners could identify strategic windows in which to act decisively, whether in naval engagements, island assaults, or air campaigns. Intelligence thus shaped the timing, scale, and focus of Allied operations, demonstrating that foreknowledge could amplify the effectiveness of limited resources in a vast theater of war. Counterintelligence operations added a layer of complexity. Deception efforts were carefully crafted to mislead Japanese planners regarding Allied capabilities, intentions, and movements. Dummy fleets, false communications, and staged operational signals created confusion and forced the enemy to misallocate resources. Analysts continuously monitored reactions to these deceptions, adjusting strategies to ensure that the impact was maximized. The orchestration of misinformation, like the collection of intelligence itself, became a vital tool in controlling the battlefield from afar. The human cost of these efforts was enormous. Cryptographers and analysts worked in secrecy under immense pressure, acutely aware that mistakes could result in catastrophic losses at sea or in the Pacific Islands. Field agents operated behind enemy lines, facing capture, imprisonment, or death. Yet their combined work created a strategic advantage that could never have been achieved solely through combat. Intelligence had become a decisive weapon, allowing the Allies to act with foresight, precision, and confidence, while the Japanese struggled to operate in a world increasingly illuminated by unseen observation. By the end of 1943, The integration of signals intelligence, human observation, reconnaissance, industrial analysis, and counterintelligence had created an unprecedented operational advantage in the Pacific. The Allies could anticipate Japanese movements, exploit vulnerabilities, and orchestrate strikes with a precision that belied the vast distances and logistical challenges of the theater. In the shadowed rooms of Washington, the Pacific Islands, and field offices across Asia, American intelligence had outsmarted the Axis, demonstrating that in modern warfare, knowledge could be as lethal as any bomb, torpedo, or battleship. While spies, cryptographers, and reconnaissance teams worked tirelessly abroad, an equally critical battlefield existed on American soil. The domestic intelligence apparatus, often invisible to the public, was crucial for interpreting incoming reports, coordinating with Allied partners, and ensuring that information flowed swiftly and accurately to commanders in the field. Analysts sifted through a relentless stream of data, intercepted communications, shipping reports, diplomatic cables, and industrial production figures. Each piece of intelligence had to be validated and contextualized, forming a comprehensive picture of enemy intentions and capabilities. Mistakes could be catastrophic, but accurate analysis could save thousands of lives and shape the outcome of distant battles. Industrial production in the United States became an integral part of this intelligence ecosystem. Analysts monitored not only domestic output, but also the delivery and movement of materials critical to Allied operations. Shipyards, aircraft factories, and munitions plants were watched with meticulous care, ensuring that resources were allocated efficiently and that production could meet the demands of multiple theaters. This domestic monitoring informed operational planning abroad. Knowing the availability of tanks, planes, and ships allowed commanders to plan campaigns with precision, confident that the logistics could sustain their efforts. Intelligence had become as much about managing one's own assets as predicting enemy actions. Signals intelligence extended to monitoring Axis communication attempts directed at or passing through the Americas. Cryptographers intercepted messages between German and Japanese agents, shipping firms, and diplomatic posts, uncovering networks of espionage, sabotage, and influence operations. Each intercept revealed a fragment of the enemy's plan, from attempted attacks on ports to coordinated propaganda efforts. Analysts decrypted these transmissions, translating codes into actionable insight that could guide domestic security measures and inform Allied operations abroad. Even thousands of miles from battlefields, American intelligence shaped the strategic environment in ways both visible and unseen. Counterintelligence efforts at home were equally vital. Agencies worked to identify and neutralize enemy spies, double agents, and collaborators who sought to disrupt the war effort. Operations were delicate, requiring careful surveillance, verification, and often lengthy observation before action could be taken. The stakes were extraordinarily high. A single compromised courier or double agent could reveal critical information to the Axis, endangering convoys, air campaigns, or field operations overseas. The success of these domestic operations reinforced the notion that intelligence was not merely reactive, it was proactive protection, safeguarding both lives and strategy. The collaboration between domestic and foreign intelligence networks created a unified system capable of predicting enemy behavior on multiple continents simultaneously. Analysts in Washington shared findings with operatives in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific, while information from field agents flowed back to refine understanding at the strategic level. This global perspective allowed the Allies to anticipate enemy strategies, synchronize operations, and act decisively with both precision and confidence. Intelligence had evolved into a cohesive, dynamic instrument, turning disparate observations into a force multiplier that shaped battles before they began. Human intelligence within occupied territories remained indispensable. Even as the U.S. strengthened domestic analysis, reports from agents in France, the Netherlands, Norway, and elsewhere provided real-time validation and context for intercepted communications. Every observation, troop movements, construction of fortifications, transport of supplies, was evaluated, cross-referenced, and integrated into operational planning. Analysts learned to discern patterns across vast datasets, transforming fragmented human observations into actionable insight that could guide strategic decisions across Europe and beyond. Deception operations also relied on this integrated intelligence system. Allied planners carefully orchestrated false information, dummy units, and misleading communications to manipulate Axis expectations. Analysts monitored enemy reactions to measure effectiveness, adjusting campaigns to maximize operational impact. In this interplay of observation and deception, intelligence became both shield and sword, protecting Allied forces while exploiting vulnerabilities in enemy planning. The unseen hand of analysis had become as influential as any weapon in theaters around the globe. By the close of 1943, American intelligence had matured into a force capable of shaping the war across continents. Signals, human, industrial, and counterintelligence were seamlessly integrated, allowing the Allies to anticipate enemy action and act decisively. From the offices of Washington to the secret rooms of occupied Europe, intelligence had become the invisible backbone of strategy. Every convoy saved, every strike guided, and every deception successfully executed proved that knowledge, carefully gathered, meticulously analyzed, and skillfully applied, could outsmart even the most formidable adversaries. By 1944, air power had emerged as a decisive factor in the Allied campaign, and American intelligence played a pivotal role in maximizing its impact. Signals and human intelligence revealed the locations of Luftwaffe bases, aircraft production facilities, and fuel depots, allowing planners to target strategic nodes with precision. Each bombing raid was guided by a detailed understanding of enemy capacity, operational rhythms, and logistical constraints. Far from random, these operations were the result of months of meticulous analysis, linking intercepted communications, reconnaissance photography, and field reports into actionable strategies that could degrade enemy strength while minimizing Allied losses. Reconnaissance aircraft provided an unparalleled window into German industrial and military infrastructure. High-altitude photography captured the minutiae of airfields, assembly plants, and rail yards. Analysts studied shadows, vehicle movement, and even the arrangement of tents to determine the scale and tempo of production. Patterns emerged, revealing vulnerabilities in the German war machine that were invisible from the ground. These insights enabled precision bombing campaigns, disrupting fighter production, aircraft repairs, and fuel supplies, thereby weakening the Luftwaffe's ability to resist Allied advances across both Europe and North Africa. Signals intelligence continued to shape operations, particularly in the interception of Luftwaffe communications. Cryptographers deciphered encrypted messages detailing sortie schedules, maintenance reports, and strategic planning. This allowed Allied commanders to predict not only the number and type of aircraft likely to be deployed, but also the timing and location of attacks. Convincing the enemy that their communications were secure while exploiting every weakness became a delicate art, with analysts constantly refining decryption methods to stay ahead of German countermeasures. In this silent contest, information became as lethal as bombs or guns. Industrial intelligence provided critical context for these operations. Analysts tracked German production rates, repair schedules, and material shortages, calculating the expected output of planes, engines, and munitions. By understanding the constraints of the enemy's manufacturing system, American planners could time strikes for maximum disruption, often hitting factories or depots just as they reached peak operational readiness. These insights transformed strategic bombing from a blunt instrument into a surgical tool, capable of shaping the enemy's capabilities weeks or even months in advance of actual engagements. Human intelligence complemented technical methods, providing validation and granularity to intercepted data. Resistance networks in occupied Europe observed aircraft movements, reported on bomb damage, and monitored repair facilities. Each report, carefully analyzed and integrated with aerial and signals intelligence, offered a more complete understanding of enemy capacity. This synergy of human observation and technological analysis allowed Allied air campaigns to strike with precision, avoiding wasted effort and amplifying the impact of each mission. Counterintelligence played a key role in protecting these efforts. Allies monitored Axis attempts to detect reconnaissance flights, intercept communications, or exploit leaks, implementing strategies to mask true intentions. Dummy facilities, simulated repairs, and misinformation about production schedules created confusion in German command, diverting resources and attention away from real vulnerabilities. Intelligence was thus a dual tool. It guided offensive operations while shaping enemy perception, turning deception into a force multiplier that amplified every strike. The human dimension of intelligence work remained profound. Analysts worked under intense pressure, often isolated and under strict secrecy, knowing that errors could lead to catastrophic consequences. Field observers and resistance agents risked exposure or death, providing critical information that could determine the success of air campaigns. Yet the results of their labor were evident in the gradual attrition of the Luftwaffe, the disruption of German production, and the ability of Allied air forces to gain air superiority, a decisive factor in the success of campaigns from Normandy to the Rhineland. By late 1944, American intelligence had transformed the strategic air war into a domain of foresight and precision. Every sortie, every bombing mission, and every reconnaissance flight was informed by a deep understanding of enemy capability, intent, and vulnerability. The integration of signals, human, and industrial intelligence had created a predictive model of warfare, where knowledge dictated the timing, scale, and focus of operations. The air campaign demonstrated that intelligence was not a passive tool, but an active force capable of shaping the battlefield, saving lives, and accelerating the defeat of a determined enemy. By 1944, the naval war had reached a critical juncture, and American intelligence had become indispensable in safeguarding convoys, planning amphibious assaults, and neutralizing enemy fleets. German U-boats continued to menace Atlantic shipping, while Japanese submarines and surface raiders threatened Pacific supply lines. Signals intelligence, combined with decrypted communications and aerial reconnaissance, allowed analysts to anticipate submarine patrol areas, predict attacks, and guide convoys along safer routes. Every ship saved through this foresight represented not just material preserved, but lives protected, underscoring the life-or-death stakes of intelligence work. Signals intelligence officers meticulously tracked Axis naval communications, exploiting even minor operator errors to gain insight into fleet movements. Intercepts revealed patterns in patrol rotations, refueling schedules, and command instructions, enabling Allied commanders to direct convoys and task forces with remarkable accuracy. Decryption efforts required constant vigilance, as the enemy frequently adjusted codes and procedures. Analysts had to anticipate these changes, innovate rapidly, and maintain operational security, ensuring that the advantage gained from intercepted information remained unchallenged. Aerial reconnaissance complemented these efforts by monitoring enemy ports, shipyards, and patrol routes. Photographers captured detailed images of submarine pins, docking arrangements, and convoy assembly areas, allowing analysts to infer fleet composition and readiness. Even subtle changes, a newly repaired pier, the presence of additional escorts, or movement of supply barges, provided crucial intelligence about operational intent. This integration of aerial observation with signals analysis created a dynamic, real-time understanding of naval threats, giving the Allies a predictive capability that often outpaced the enemy's planning. Human intelligence played a pivotal role as well. Agents embedded in occupied territories or neutral ports observed shipping activity, troop movements, and resupply operations. They reported seemingly minor details: the arrival of a supply ship, the transport of fuel, the presence of military personnel, that, when combined with decryption and reconnaissance data, revealed larger operational patterns. Analysts transformed these fragmented insights into actionable guidance, allowing Allied navies to preemptively counter threats and coordinate complex maneuvers across thousands of miles of ocean. Industrial intelligence also influenced naval strategy. Analysts tracked the production and repair rates of enemy ships, the availability of torpedoes and munitions, and logistical constraints in ports. This information allowed Allied planners to exploit periods of reduced enemy readiness, targeting critical facilities, timing convoys, and allocating resources efficiently. Understanding the limitations of enemy capacity provided a strategic advantage, enabling operations to be timed with maximum impact and minimal risk to Allied forces. Counterintelligence reinforced these successes by protecting operational secrets and misleading the enemy. Deception efforts included false radio traffic, dummy fleets, and staged movements designed to confuse Axis planners. Analysts monitored enemy reactions to evaluate effectiveness, refining strategies to maximize impact. By shaping enemy perception as carefully as battlefield action, intelligence officers extended their influence far beyond analysis, transforming foresight and deception into decisive tools of war. The human element in naval intelligence remained profound and dangerous. Cryptographers and analysts labored in secrecy, under extreme pressure, while field agents risked capture or death to provide critical information. Each successful interception or observation could prevent a catastrophe at sea, while every error threatened lives and vital supplies. The courage, ingenuity, and dedication of these individuals highlighted the inseparable link between human effort and strategic outcome, demonstrating that intelligence was both a science and a profoundly human endeavor. By the end of 1944, American naval intelligence had achieved a level of sophistication that allowed the Allies to dominate the seas. Convoys moved with reduced risk, enemy fleets were frequently anticipated, and amphibious operations, such as the invasions of southern France and the Philippines, benefited from predictive insight. The integration of signals, human, industrial, and counterintelligence had transformed naval warfare into a domain of precision and foresight. In the invisible currents of information and analysis, the Allies had gained mastery over an enemy who still relied on secrecy and surprise, proving that intelligence could decisively shape the course of war across the oceans. As 1944 progressed, the focus of Allied intelligence increasingly turned toward the liberation of Western Europe. The upcoming invasion of Normandy, Operation Overlord, depended not only on brute force but on an unprecedented orchestration of intelligence across multiple disciplines. Codebreakers in Washington and London worked tirelessly to decipher German communications, revealing the locations of troop concentrations, defensive preparations, and logistical movements. The information gleaned from these decrypts allowed planners to predict the timing, strength, and deployment of enemy forces with remarkable accuracy, transforming uncertainty into actionable insight. Signals intelligence offered a window into the mindset of German commanders. Intercepted communications revealed their expectations, fears, and misunderstandings, enabling the Allies to anticipate reactions to both real and deceptive operations. Analysts identified key divisions, artillery placements, and reserve units, providing vital context for amphibious landings, airborne insertions, and coordinated bombardments. By integrating this information with reconnaissance and field reports, planners created a precise operational map that guided the largest invasion in history, balancing risk and opportunity with unparalleled foresight. Aerial reconnaissance intensified in the months leading up to D-Day. Photographs of the Normandy coastlines, inland roads, and defensive fortifications were scrutinized for every detail: bunkers, gun emplacements, minefields, and troop movements. Analysts compared successive images to detect changes, identify construction trends, and estimate defensive strength. These insights directly influenced landing site selection, timing, and the allocation of naval and aerial firepower. In this way, intelligence transformed a perilous amphibious operation into a carefully calculated strategy grounded in knowledge rather than conjecture. Human intelligence networks played a crucial role in validating these findings. Resistance groups in France provided reports on German patrols, fortification construction, and morale. Couriers, informants, and sympathetic locals risked execution to deliver observations that could confirm or contradict decrypted messages. Analysts integrated these insights with signals and reconnaissance data, achieving a multidimensional understanding of the battlefield that enabled precise planning. The symbiosis between local observation and high-level code-breaking exemplified the depth and sophistication of Allied intelligence efforts. Industrial and logistical intelligence further shaped strategic decisions. Analysts monitored German supply lines, ammunition depots, and reinforcement routes to predict the flow of troops and material to the Normandy front. By understanding production capacities and logistical constraints, planners could anticipate where and when German forces might be deployed. This information informed both the timing of the landings and the sequence of follow-up operations, ensuring that the initial assault would encounter maximum disruption and minimal organized resistance. Deception operations, including Operation Fortitude, relied heavily on intelligence to manipulate German perceptions. Dummy armies, simulated radio traffic, and false reports of landing sites diverted attention away from Normandy, forcing the enemy to misallocate divisions and resources. Analysts monitored German responses to these operations, adjusting deception strategies in real time to maximize their impact. By shaping enemy expectations, intelligence officers turned misperception into a decisive force multiplier, making the overwhelming success of the landings possible. The human cost of intelligence work during this period remained staggering. Field agents, couriers, and resistance members faced constant danger behind enemy lines, while cryptographers and analysts labored under secrecy and extreme pressure. Each decrypted message, observation, and validated report had the potential to save thousands of lives or prevent catastrophic losses. The dedication and courage of these individuals underscored the profound moral and practical stakes of intelligence, highlighting that victory depended as much on careful analysis and human ingenuity as on weapons or manpower. By the eve of D-Day, American intelligence had transformed the landscape of military planning. The integration of signals, human, reconnaissance, industrial, and counterintelligence created a precise, actionable, and anticipatory understanding of the enemy. The Allies did not merely react to German defenses. They shaped the battlefield in advance, turning uncertainty into advantage. In this convergence of knowledge, analysis, and daring, intelligence proved that the war could be won not only through firepower, but through foresight, proving the invisible hand of American intelligence to be as formidable as any division on the ground. In the winter of 1944, the Allies faced one of the most harrowing challenges of the European campaign, the German Ardennes Offensive, later known as the Battle of the Bulge. American intelligence had anticipated some enemy activity, but the scale and audacity of the attack tested every facet of the Allied intelligence apparatus. Signals intercepts, reconnaissance, and human reports revealed troop movements and fuel shortages, yet fog, snow, and deliberate deception by German forces created uncertainty. Analysts raced against time to piece together incomplete information, knowing that accurate predictions could prevent a disaster and save tens of thousands of lives. Signals intelligence played a critical role in detecting the early stages of the offensive. Intercepts of German communications indicated the mobilization of armored divisions and the coordination of artillery units. Analysts scrutinized changes in coding, unusual radio silence, and the volume of messages, using subtle anomalies to infer operational plans. This real-time monitoring allowed Allied commanders to anticipate potential breakthroughs, identify weak points, and position reinforcements strategically, demonstrating that even partial intelligence could have outsized effects when applied with analytical rigor. Aerial reconnaissance faced severe challenges in the Ardennes as dense forests, snowstorms, and rugged terrain obscured visibility. Yet reconnaissance pilots and analysts persevered, capturing images of road traffic, unit encampments, and artillery positions whenever conditions permitted. These photographs, combined with intercepted communications, allowed planners to estimate enemy strength and projected movement. Even a small insight, a convoy traveling at an unusual hour, a concentration of vehicles near a forested path, could provide actionable intelligence that reshaped tactical deployments. Human intelligence within Belgium and Luxembourg provided vital confirmation. Resistance networks reported sightings of troop movements, fuel transports, and supply depots, filling gaps left by signals and aerial observation. Couriers braved snow and enemy patrols to deliver fragmented information, which analysts painstakingly cross-referenced with other intelligence sources. This collaboration allowed the Allies to construct a coherent operational picture despite the chaos of winter and the intentional obfuscation of the German advance. Industrial and logistical intelligence added another layer of understanding. Analysts assessed the ability of German forces to sustain the offensive, noting fuel scarcity, limited artillery ammunition, and overextended supply lines. By calculating how long units could operate before logistical breakdown, planners could time counterattacks and allocate reserves effectively. Intelligence, in this sense, not only predicted the enemy's moves but also revealed the limits of their operational endurance, turning scarcity into strategic leverage. Counterintelligence efforts focused on maintaining operational security and misleading the enemy regarding Allied awareness and intentions. Radio silence, deceptive transmissions, and controlled leaks kept German commanders uncertain about the Allies' readiness to respond. This deliberate manipulation of perception, integrated with accurate intelligence, allowed the Allies to conserve resources and mount a more effective defense. Intelligence had become both a shield and a sword, shaping enemy decisions while protecting the forces it served. The human cost of these intelligence efforts remained profound. Analysts worked under extreme pressure, often with little sleep, balancing urgency with accuracy. Field agents risked capture or death in hostile territory, providing critical insights under harrowing conditions. Each piece of intelligence, whether a decrypted message, reconnaissance photograph, or field report, had tangible consequences for soldiers on the front lines. Their courage and diligence were as decisive in halting the German advance as any brigade, artillery battery, or armored division. By the end of the Ardennes campaign, American intelligence had demonstrated its capacity to mitigate disaster through foresight, analysis, and integration. Signals, human, reconnaissance, industrial, and counterintelligence combined to detect, monitor, and ultimately help neutralize a surprise offensive that could have crippled Allied momentum. The battle underscored that intelligence was not merely a supporting tool. It was a force capable of shaping the course of war, turning uncertainty into advantage, and preserving the lives and effectiveness of Allied forces under the most extreme conditions. By early 1945, Allied forces were preparing for the final push into the heart of Germany, and intelligence had become the decisive instrument guiding operations. Signals intercepts revealed not only troop movements but also internal German debates, logistical constraints, and desperation-driven decisions. Analysts sifted through a flood of communications, separating routine administrative chatter from operational directives, while constantly refining predictive models. Each insight allowed commanders to allocate forces strategically, ensuring that offensives struck with maximum impact while minimizing unnecessary losses. Aerial reconnaissance intensified as Allied bombers and scout planes mapped cities, rail networks, and industrial complexes across the Ruhr and other key regions. Photographs captured the pace of fortification construction, troop encampments, and transport activity, revealing bottlenecks and potential weak points. Analysts compared imagery over time, identifying patterns in repair, resupply, and troop redeployment. These insights informed tactical planning, guiding artillery, armor, and infantry movements with unprecedented precision. The battlefield was no longer opaque. Intelligence illuminated both opportunity and threat at every stage. Human intelligence in occupied Germany and surrounding territories complemented technological efforts. Resistance groups, informants, and defectors provided critical reports on morale, local defenses, and the disposition of key units. Even seemingly minor observations, such as supply movements through secondary roads or the presence of poorly trained auxiliary troops, were integrated into a broader understanding of enemy readiness. By combining human and technological intelligence, planners could exploit vulnerabilities that were invisible to traditional reconnaissance, ensuring a multidimensional approach to operations. Industrial and logistical intelligence was central to understanding the limitations of German forces. Analysts tracked fuel shortages, production slowdowns, and transportation bottlenecks, calculating how long frontline units could continue effective resistance. These assessments allowed Allied commanders to time offensives to coincide with periods of maximum enemy weakness, ensuring that advances were decisive and sustainable. Intelligence had shifted the dynamic from reactive combat to preemptive strategy, making operational decisions increasingly a matter of foresight rather than chance. Counterintelligence operations protected both strategy and morale. Allied officers carefully monitored leaks, monitored suspected collaborators, and employed deception to mislead German commanders regarding the location and scale of attacks. Dummy formations, fake radio traffic, and staged troop movements diverted attention away from critical thrusts, multiplying the effectiveness of real operations. By controlling perception as well as action, intelligence officers created strategic advantages far beyond the immediate tactical environment, shaping the outcome before engagement even began. The human cost of intelligence work remained immense. Cryptographers, analysts, and field agents operated under extreme pressure, often isolated for days or weeks, aware that errors could result in catastrophic consequences. Despite these risks, their work continued to inform strategic decision-making at every level. Each successful analysis, decrypted message, or validated field report could directly influence the course of battles and the speed of Allied advances, demonstrating that human diligence and courage were as critical to victory as firepower or manpower. By mid-1945, intelligence had guided the Allies to the brink of final victory. German defenses, exhausted and fragmented, were unable to resist the combined foresight, planning, and operational coordination enabled by signals, human, reconnaissance, industrial, and counterintelligence. The integration of these disciplines had transformed warfare into a contest of knowledge and prediction, where forethought dictated outcomes as decisively as combat prowess. Intelligence had proven itself to be both a shield and a sword, shaping the battlefield and accelerating the collapse of a determined adversary. As Allied forces closed in on Berlin, the culmination of intelligence work became evident. From decrypting communications to analyzing industrial output, from guiding air campaigns to informing ground assaults, American intelligence had orchestrated a war fought as much in shadows and briefing rooms as on the front lines. The victory was a testament to the unseen architects of strategy, whose labor turned information into power, uncertainty into advantage, and the chaos of war into a carefully guided path toward triumph. In these final months, intelligence revealed its ultimate truth, that knowledge, more than any weapon, had been the decisive force shaping the end of the conflict. As the war drew to a close in Europe and the Pacific, the full impact of American intelligence became unmistakable. Years of painstaking work, cryptography, reconnaissance, human observation, industrial analysis, and counterintelligence, had cumulatively shaped the outcome of the conflict. Battles were won not solely through firepower or numbers, but through foresight, precision, and an unprecedented integration of information. Intelligence had become a strategic instrument capable of molding decisions, predicting enemy action, and creating decisive advantages that reverberated across continents and oceans alike. The success of intelligence during the war established new paradigms for military strategy. Signals intercepts, once a supplementary tool, had proven critical in anticipating enemy movements, deciphering command structures, and revealing vulnerabilities. Human intelligence demonstrated the irreplaceable value of courage, observation, and local knowledge. Industrial and logistical analysis enabled planners to exploit enemy weaknesses systematically, while counterintelligence ensured that operations remained protected from exposure. Together, these disciplines transformed warfare from a contest of attrition into a battle of insight, where knowledge dictated the tempo and direction of campaigns. The human dimension of intelligence work left a lasting imprint. Cryptographers, analysts, and field agents often labored in obscurity, their contributions invisible to the public yet essential to victory. Many risked, and some lost, their lives to deliver accurate information, prevent disasters, or manipulate enemy perception. Their dedication exemplified the intersection of intellect and courage, showing that the outcome of global conflict often rested as much on human ingenuity and resolve as on artillery or naval power. The war had revealed that the most lethal weapon might not be a gun, tank, or plane, but knowledge applied with precision and foresight. American intelligence also fostered unprecedented collaboration between nations. Cooperation with British codebreakers, resistance networks, and Allied planners created a system that operated seamlessly across borders. Information flowed, analyses were shared, and operations were coordinated in real time. This international integration magnified the effectiveness of intelligence, demonstrating that the war could not be won by isolated effort, but by the orchestration of collective insight. The alliances forged through intelligence work would shape military and diplomatic strategies for decades to come. The lessons of wartime intelligence extended beyond the battlefield. Methodologies developed for decrypting communications, analyzing industrial output, and coordinating global networks influenced post-war national security, diplomacy, and technological innovation. The meticulous attention to detail, analytical rigor, and integration of multiple intelligence streams became foundational principles for the Cold War and future conflicts. In this sense, the war's invisible victories laid the groundwork for an era in which information itself would be a decisive instrument of power. Intelligence had also reshaped public understanding of war. The invisible architects of strategy, cryptographers, analysts, and spies, demonstrated that victory depended as much on foresight and coordination as on combat alone. By safeguarding secrets, guiding operations, and manipulating enemy perception, these professionals proved that the unseen dimensions of conflict were as consequential as the visible battles. Their work highlighted the moral and strategic responsibility inherent in controlling information, showing that intelligence was not merely a tool, but a form of stewardship over both lives and outcomes. As the final Axis forces surrendered, the cumulative effect of intelligence was undeniable. From anticipating Hitler's Ardennes offensive to guiding the D-Day invasion, from neutralizing U-boat threats to outmaneuvering Japanese forces across the Pacific, American intelligence had consistently provided the foresight that turned potential setbacks into decisive victories. The war's conclusion was not only a triumph of arms, but a triumph of information, analysis, and human ingenuity applied at the highest stakes. In every theater, intelligence had saved lives, accelerated victory, and minimized the chaos inherent in global conflict. Ultimately, the legacy of American intelligence in World War II was profound and enduring. It demonstrated that knowledge, carefully gathered, meticulously analyzed, and skillfully applied, could outsmart even the most formidable adversaries. The invisible victories achieved through cryptography, human observation, industrial analysis, and counterintelligence were as decisive as any battlefield conquest. In the annals of history, the war revealed a timeless truth. The greatest power in modern warfare is not merely the strength of armies, but the clarity, precision, and insight with which intelligence is wielded, turning uncertainty into advantage and shaping the fate of nations in ways that would echo long after the guns fell silent.